What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, we're living under a rock, seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another Sit Down video. If you're listening to us currently on iTunes or Spotify, welcome in. Leave us a detailed review and a 5-star rating. What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Sit Down. I am your host, Jeff Nadu. Today we have another very interesting episode of the show, and it's another interview. There's been a lot of talk here on YouTube about people getting extorted in prison. We're hearing a lot of things about Joey Merlino by certain reporters, or what they would call themselves, reporters out of Detroit. We've heard a lot of talk about a lot of things, and I felt like it was important to finally speak to a guy that I've been a fan of for a long time. I follow him on Instagram. He has a terrific Instagram called DC Blacks. He has a good YouTube channel called DC Blacks as well. And he's a man who knows a lot about federal prison. He's doing what he can to let people know about what goes on and his own story about what went on for him behind the wall. He's done some great interviews as well. Let's bring him on now. His name is Eyone Williams. Eyone, what's happening, my man? Thank you for coming on with me. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Jeff. What's happening? How you doing, man? Thanks for having me. All that good stuff.
I'm doing well, and I've been a fan of your content for a long time. I've seen a bunch of videos you've done. You've interviewed a bunch of guys. The guy Fly you interviewed, those are terrific interviews, man. Really
appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah, wealth of knowledge. You did 50 years in prison.
Yeah, I mean that's who would know it better? But I think I really became fascinated with some of the content you do. You did an interview with Fly about John Gotti in Marion, and I think, before we get into what we're talking about, that is really one of the big mysteries. Like, what exactly happened there with the guy Walter Johnson? What exactly happened? And I think he painted a pretty good picture, because there are very few people that actually know, right? I mean, not many of us were actually at Marion. So, and then you did a video recently with this ridiculous story about Joey Merlino, put out by Scott Bernstein. And I thought, well, maybe we'll get you on. We could talk a little bit more about it. I also want to talk to you about your own life. You did a bunch of time in prison. So I guess we'll kind of start there. You're from Northwest DC. As many people know, DC doesn't have a state prison system. They are a federal jurisdiction. You grew up, I know you've talked about you were selling narcotics for a period of time. I know you talked about you watched Scarface. That kind of introduced you to that world a little bit. You were hanging around a lot of older people. In your teenage years, you got 15 to life. Tell me about what led up to that. What happened?
By the time I was 16, I had been running the streets for a couple years. I don't know how many years you could run the streets at 16 without exaggerating something like we in Hollywood, but I grew up in an urban area, so certain things that you see, and I got involved in some of those things when it came to drug dealing. But by the time I was 16, I had been in and out of a juvenile facility. I had been, introduced to different type of people that were a little older than me. And one thing led to another, and selling drugs and being in the streets led to robbery, and one thing led to another. But to get specifically to this, because I was just talking about the lifestyle, when I was a teenager, I was buying drugs from a person, and I didn't like what I got. And as I told this story before, the only reason I'm giving you this much detail because I don't went into it already. But once I got some drugs that I wasn't pleased with, as they say in the streets, my money wasn't returned. And from that point on, I kind of came up with a plan to rob someone. And that robbery turned into a homicide. And that homicide got me a life sentence based on me being charged as an adult. At 16 years old, as you said, when I first was arrested for that, it was an armed robbery and a homicide. When I was first arrested for that, I was charged as an adult. We had what was called the Lawton Reformatory, the DC Department of Correction. We had a local prison system then. So I actually went to that prison system first, and we can get into that. But if you committed any crime from murder to some type of armed robbery and you were 16 in Washington, D.C., you were charged as an adult. So I was sent to the D.C. jail. But you asked me about that charge, which is the charge that led me into prison. But I skipped around a whole bunch of that stuff because I had interactions with the juvenile system before that. But that's the charge that sent me to adult prison. That's the charge that got me in the federal system eventually as well when Lawton closed. But that's what it's about.
I want to take back, before that, in your younger years, like, what was your childhood like? I mean, did you have, were your mother and father both around? What, look, obviously, the streets, I think for most people, unfortunately, and all the people that I talk about, a lot of people's lives are kind of decided for them. They maybe have a father that was in that world or something. What made you get into that? Was it just strictly you wanted to make money and you didn't want to work a regular job? Or what was it?
To be honest with you, mine probably was a little bit of a mix, right? I had friends that probably were my fault. I had friends that were, probably in a less favorable economic situation than me, but for a term that everybody in the whole country or in the whole world can understand, I really came from a middle class background. But you mentioned that I'm from Northwest Washington, D.C., and in urban terms or subculture terms, Northwest Washington, D.C. is where uptown is. And, to give a more universal thing, how New York City has this thing between Brooklyn and Harlem is a more flashier type. All right, uptown is like a Harlem in D.C. So money making, right? Not that I was ever no money making flash movie Hollywood guy, but money making is a thing that was not frowned upon. And selling drugs were a part of hustling, although there's a lot of other hustling. So I never really saw selling drugs itself as selling drugs and poison in my community and all these things that I know now as a 40-year-old man. As a kid, it was just hustling. So I was introduced to hustling by older cousins, older brothers, uncles, and fathers. Now, I also had a grandmother that was from the South that raised Black children as Black grandmothers from the South raised them. Discipline, church, and school. So I can't sit here and, act like that was not there. But unfortunately, tragedy struck in my life. And by the time I was 3 or 4 years old, my father was sent to prison for robbery. By the time I was 6 years old, my mother had an overdose from drugs, and I was just left with I wasn't just left with my grandmother this time. All this time happened at the same time. It was just me and my mother, and then my grandmother and my mother passed. So I kind of got into the streets by not having a whole lot of people around at that time, and my aunt ended up having to raise me. But in the process of that, all these things that go on as a kid, I believe that I was drawn to the streets to be able to take care of myself, just being outside, wanting to be independent. And like I said, I'm in a part of town in Washington, D.C., doing what I would consider the beginning and probably some of the height of the crack era. And I was a child in this crack era, but nevertheless, you had teenage millionaires when I was a kid, as I've spoken about before. Never do I want to imply that I was one, but if you think about how people make these terms that would you rather have 1% of a billion or 100% of nothing? It was so much money in the streets that even kids like me at 14, 15, 16 years old had $50,000, $60,000. So when you say, was it the money I was attracted to? I think I would be exaggerating if I just said it was the money, but it was the lifestyle. And in the lifestyle, you may accumulate a couple of dollars that's far beyond, you having to put a master plan together, which is why I don't think it's a whole bunch of kids that are sitting on $100,000 like it was in the crack era. So that's my answer to that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say it like that because you mentioned that like people that were selling narcotics at a high level, they were almost treated not royalty like, but they were well known. People knew who they were.
I mean, in the urban community, they celebrities. I mean,
yeah,
you go on to Joey Merlino, you have Black people that looked up to Joey Merlino like a celebrity. Not everything if he was alleged to have done, but I'm just saying it don't matter if you're Black or white or Chinese. If you're a hood star in the hood, you're a celebrity.
And it was also, as you said, it was kind of accepted. Like, and I've heard John Gotti Jr. talk about that. He mentioned how like the big bookmaker, like the bookie or like a loan shark, everybody did it. Like it was just like a normal thing. So it wasn't really looked down upon as it is now. It's like a poison type of thing. So you came up mostly in the 80s, right? You mentioned the crack epidemic, that sort of thing.
I grew up in the 80s. I was more so a kid in the 80s. I started running around in the streets probably 88, 89.
Well, that's what my question leads to. So like we've heard of like obviously Rayful Edmonds, Eddie Mathis, like a lot of these guys in Baltimore or Washington, and Baltimore's not far away either. I mean, and again, like Rayful's obviously an informant, like we all know that, but the stories about Rayful are quite well known.
I think they are unique.
Yeah, I mean, did you know about people like that?
I've never met Rayful Edmonds, but Washington, D.C. is very small.
Sure.
So Rayful Edmond was on the nightly news during the time of his case over and over and over again. So you couldn't have been here at that time and didn't know him. But also, I was a young guy that looked up to hood stars, as we just spoke about, right? So Rayful Edmonds' name was humongous in the streets long before social media. Like I grew up here. The same way you may know someone and know someone and know someone like that when you talk about someone from somewhere else, he was a giant here. So it was no way not to know who he was. And as young as junior high school, we knew who Rayful Edmond was in my age range.
So was he like a hero to you in a way?
Not to me, not at all. And the only reason why I'm saying that answer like that is not because he's a rat now. And I can sit up here and shit on him all day because of that. But I'm talking about before that, because you evidently asking me before that. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a hero to me because I didn't know him well enough. But he was someone that you heard of, and if you were into subculture, the streets, and hustling and getting money, I think you had to admire him. I like most of the guys here that know him and knew him personally, whether they say it publicly or not. A lot of them still admire the things that he's done in that game.
Sure.
I want to cut it off there because usually I don't talk about it, but the angle in which you're asking me about it is relevant.
No, fair enough. So you eventually mentioned you get 15 to life. You're a young kid, right? Not a child, but you're a young man. You're not.
Nah. Let me correct you right there. I was so tough and macho at 16 that we were taught never to say child or kid. But now that I'm an adult and I'm seeing he's doing these same things to some of these tough kids, I wasn't a man. I wasn't a man at all. I was a kid. I was a child.
Right. Sure. And at that, you hear the words life at the end of that. As you know, it's not technically life. You got to know, though, you're going to do a decent amount of time in prison. And I always would say, like, the best years of my life were between 20 and 30 and then into like my 30s, like where I'm at now. Most of that for you was going to be inside prison. And you mentioned you went to Lorton, which was a notoriously bad place. You're going to be around a lot of killers and men, right? What were your thoughts when you heard did it resonate to you that you were going to a place like that?
Yes, because growing up in Washington, D.C., Lorton, if you growing up in urban Washington, D.C. or Black Washington, D.C., you had a family member or someone that you knew that was there. You heard all the stories. The stories trickle all the way back to the free world, all the way down to the juvenile delinquents, and all the way down to the regular kids, right? And by the time I was incarcerated, I had already been to a juvenile facility a couple times. Some of my older friends or cousins, I'm not even going to get into my father yet. I'm just talking about people that could tell you stories that they had seen. They were already there, unfortunately, at 16, 17, or 18. And then, by the way, I already told you my father went down there in like 81. Mm-hmm. So I knew what the place was. By the time I found myself in that scenario, I had to deal with the reality of the time that I was facing. I was facing 90 years at first. I pled guilty to the second-degree murder, right? And ended up getting 15 to life. But by the time I digested that I was going to Lorton, life had already changed for me so drastically that I don't think that I paid it any attention until I got there. But once I got there, I realized what you were saying. You hear all the stories that prison is like this and Lorton prison is like that. But when you finally, they chain you up and they put the handcuffs on you and the shackle on your feet and they run the chain down the middle and they put you on the bus with guys that's coming back from Lewisburg and Leavenworth. And you think you done heard everything, but now you seeing the guy beside you say, damn, Sean, I just done 40 years. I hope you can make it. I'm just getting home. And you passing him, and then you get down there and you smelling the food and you seeing the darkness, you seeing where you're going to be. Reality kicks in at 17. I told you I caught the case at 16, but when I stepped off the bus, I was 17. And I actually first got down Lorton because I tried to escape from CTF, which most people would consider part of DC jail. That would be the detention part of where you go at, right? So I actually didn't even go down Lorton like a regular person. Like by the time I got the time to 15 in life, which probably leads into this question you're talking about, how do you process it? Well, one of the ways in which I process it, I tried to go over the wall. So I think actions speak louder than words in certain situations. You can ask me about that after I finish this, but when I got down there, me and a co-defendant of mine by the name of Andre Brown, we were sent to what's called control. You've done history and journalism on Murray, and Murray had a control.
Sure.
All max joints had a control, okay? So for people who may not understand what control is like solitary inside a solitary place. That was my first stop. And when I came through the door with my partner and the shackles and the chain jiggling and jiggling and jiggling, I never forget that the young said, "We got 2 juveniles." And it's only 8 cells in this place. And it was the very last cell. It was only like 8 or 9 cells in this place. But the very last cell is one of those steel door boxcars that Pete Early describes in that book, The Hot House. Oh, and in No Human Contact, he describes it in that book as well. Anyway, I got placed in that cell. No light, no windows for 18 days. So that was my introduction to the place. And I began to wonder. You don't get to thinking about, can I do 15 years? You begin to wonder, man, will the 15 years turn into 100 years? Can I do 1 or 2 years? Like, you begin to contemplate all those things. And the only thing that I can tell you to be realistic to you, man, be realistic with you, is that, you know, Lawton, like most serious prisons and penitentiary, be it state or federal, where people die at, I don't know too many people that weren't insane that never contemplated their mortality, right? And, you know, my thing at that point in time is 17 years old. And I did think I was tough. I will throw that out there. I thought I could deal with whatever, but I knew that there were people that were far more advanced and far more violent and far more sophisticated and maybe even far more experienced than me at the time. So I began to do my time just one day at a time. And eventually, after 17 years, day after day, week after week, through every place that I went to, because I've been to 13, 14 different penitentiaries, you just begin to learn.
Sure. Let me ask you about the 18 days, because I heard someone talk about isolation once, and they say, you know, I hear all these people say, I would love to be alone. And they've never really been alone, because when they are, they'll hate it, right? Because it's like, we all want to have that like solace where we can just do what we want and we're alone and you have freedom. But the difference between that and where you were is there is no freedom. You have to stay there. After how long did it just get to you? I mean, 18 days is a long time. I mean, when you really think about it, when you're sitting in one place, and it's, you know, I always say, like, I'm sure you could agree, I've never been there, obviously, but it's like sitting in a closet, right? I mean,
I
maybe not
work
even
with
that big.
young men that are on the verge of going down the road that I went down.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I get them one-on-one or I get them in a group and I'm close up on them, to wait for one of the ways that I try to really explain it to the ones that haven't been to juvenile, because some of these young guys have been to juvenile places, they've been to some juvenile places that are better than some adult detention places, but not those ones, the ones that don't understand at all. The example and the analogies I use are sitting in your bathroom over the weekend and never coming out, and then imagining your bathroom with bars. That's what it's like in one of those solitary joints, especially
And
with
also,
one.
remember too, like, your bathroom at your house is nice, it's clean, you know, it's, you got body wash and all this different stuff, you know, whatever you need, nice towels. There, it's like, I'm sure you know, tell us what it's like. It's dirty, it's drabby, it's disgusting.
In control, no, I could give you. I'm sitting up just taking myself back there. In control, I'm gonna be honest with you. That's one of the most filthiest places that I've ever been. Like I said, it's between 8 and 9 cells back there, right? But there was a person that I'm now going to use a correct term. There was a mentally challenged person. We didn't know how to use mentally challenged back then.
Wow.
Right? We just said it was a crazy dude in there, okay? It was a crazy dude in there that also was Rainbow, okay?
Okay.
And he used to throw feces and urine on the COs, on convicts that he didn't like. So it was August when I came in there. Multiply feces, urine, neglect, no hygiene, and heat. That should give a person an example of the smell. And then when they put me in the last cell hadn't been clean. So I'm not gonna say it's been feces and urine all in there. Like, I'd heard terror stories like that. I didn't encounter that, but what I did encounter was garbage and food and all these other type of things with no cleaning material, and being as though I was supposed to be being punished. You know, I didn't get the bare necessity, so I was in there on a metal rack. Like, nowadays they got dudes on concrete racks sometimes, but I was on a metal rack with, you know, with no mattress, no nothing. I had bloodshot eyes. I almost lost my eyesight because of them. They hid me there because I was a juvenile, and you're not supposed to be in a penitentiary type environment without a conviction. I had been I hadn't been sentenced, right? I did have a conviction because I pled guilty, but I was an unsentenced juvenile in Lorton's maximum security facility. And for 2 weeks, they didn't know what they were going to do with me because they didn't know if they were going to charge me again with an attempted escape. And then it would come out that they let me out with adults, which was technically illegal and would be a lawsuit. A whole lot of bureaucratic things happened to me. But by the time they realized that my eyes were bloodshot red and I was going to be in danger of losing my eyesight, they had to take me out of this place and send me back to Washington, D.C. to a place called D.C. General Hospital, where I had to, undergo like a 72-hour surgery to save my eyesight. So that was my introduction to Lorton.
Now that had to do, the eyesight stuff had to do with just looking at the same thing for...
No. It had something to do with the ass whooping I took when we tried to escape the first sent us to Lorton prematurely.
Okay, got you. Yeah, because I talked to a guy that went to ADX. He was there for like 3 years, and he told me that after a while, his eyesight just got fucked.
Well, I haven't experienced that to my knowledge, right? But I read an article about Mumi Abu-Jamal, and some of the people that was talking about his eyesight mentioned that it was the first time I heard it. So I can't give you any insight on it. I didn't experience that, but I've heard people say the constant beam of the fluorescent lights and the white walls damages eyesight.
That's what he said.
Yeah. I didn't experience that though. Okay.
I want to ask you, this is kind of just a question I have, because I've noticed this in like The Wire, for instance. In The Wire, they talk a lot about DC, and they insinuate throughout the different seasons that like DC is almost kind of the place where the real killers are. They kind of mention that a lot in the show. And like the one character goes to this place, Boys Village, and it's like and they kind of tell him like, oh, those DC boys will get you there. Like, it's almost insinuated that they were kind of like the tougher city in a way, I guess.
All right, let me correct that though. They could have, at those points in time in that film, they could have been leaning toward that, but let me not get into the mind of Ed Burns and them. Let me just tell you the real deal. Baltimore, and in all actuality, Baltimore, as far as violent crime, may be on paper more violent than DC right now. In the 90s, we were neck and neck, although DC was the murder capital, and by all means, I'm not saying that in a proud way, okay?
Yeah.
But it's no doubt that in 1991 or 92, that the murder rate was like 482. We were almost at 500. Baltimore City, which is actually bigger than our city, has always been a violent place. If you do an archive search of the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Times, the Washington Post, the Washington Star, things that people don't even remember, the Black communities in Baltimore and Washington are almost parallel communities. Although we have different styles, our slang, everything that we do, but that place, it's not that it was more killers in DC. Like, I can name projects and dudes right now, but we'll get into a whole nother story about Baltimore. It's the same thing. And what I will say now that a lot of people don't know is that, you know, with the drug laws and the over incarceration that led to mass incarceration all over the country, it hit DC so hard that it crumbled to an extent our underground subculture criminal history. Baltimore, through the ins and outs of the war on drugs, have always maintained big boys, or what you would call drug kingpins. It's a heroin capital damn near the East Coast. People argue with that Atlanta stuff. You know, I don't know about that. Atlanta might be the dope capital of the South, but the East Coast, I think everybody would agree that Baltimore has the biggest heroin label on it. I don't know what word I'm looking for right now.
No, they had, I mean, they've been documented through history, you know, Little Melvin, you know, Big Head Brother, all those guys. I mean, they were Liddy Jones.
So I could get away with saying that kind of, right?
Yeah.
Now, there was some big guys from here, and I'm doing some research on people from back then, but I'm just keeping it all the way real now.
I would say, if you ask me, it's New York. I mean, Frank Matthews, people like that. But yeah, I mean, Philadelphia, Baltimore. I mean,
connection wise and everything, but let me ask you a question on the Frank Matthews tip, right?
Yeah.
Even with you saying Frank Matthews, and I wouldn't dispute you on that from what you're saying, right? But I still want to double down on the fact, is New York known as a dope city?
Well, no, I mean, that's just where they ended up. A lot of those guys were from North Carolina and the South, and they just.
But if you thought about the most drugs that come from New York, what would you think? Just out from back then to now.
I think that was probably where the hubs they lived, like you know what I'm saying? But
I feel you on that. I was just asking.
Yeah, in terms of like this whole time, yeah, I think Baltimore, Philadelphia. I mean, that little corridor there, the Beltway-ish area.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of what they known for. I'm not even saying if they did it more or not. I mean, of course, New York is a humongous,
Yeah,
much
it's so
bigger
big.
entry point than Baltimore.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? But
It's so
anyway,
big.
to finish the question that you asked me, the whole thing about Boys Village in the Wire, right? Boys Village is because they sent a Baltimore guy way down almost to DC. So DC dudes was kind of known for boxing with their hands. Baltimore dudes were kind of known for picking you up, body slamming you, knee, and you fucking you up.
Okay.
We call that wrestling where we from in DC. So that's a DC Baltimore. In all actuality, it's really a brotherly taunt, technically, because I'm old enough to so now. Some young guys may say, nah, I'm telling you, I lived through that, and I went to the federal penitentiary. And in the federal penitentiary, those are our brothers. Those are our homies. Those are our partners. So only kids and dudes that have never been to the prison system got this Baltimore, D.C. rivalry. But the men in D.C., especially because you mentioned killers, if we talking about killers and violent crime, whether we're talking about Jewish, Italian, or black, the killers and all people that fit in that category are the same.
Sure, 100%. So when did you like kind of go into you were at Lorton for a while? Real quick at Lorton, you met Wayne Perry there, right?
I didn't meet Wayne Perry in Lorton. I met Wayne Perry in DC jail.
Okay. What was that like?
Meeting him or being in DC jail?
Yeah, because he's one of those, kind of like
nobody ever asked me that question like that. Wayne Perry,
I asked you, hold on a sec. I asked you that just because like Wayne Perry, as you talked about, like he's kind of figured as like this like figure that like is really well known, and he's well known throughout the jail system. He's well known out in the streets. He's kind of this really just well known hood figure. So like, what was that like meeting him?
I mean, maybe if I wasn't the guy that had already ran the streets and knew a bunch of people's names, maybe I would have been enamored or this or that. But in DC at that time, everybody that was in the Washington Post that were street celebrities, gangsters, and killers, they were in this one particular unit that I was in. And I knew most of them now. I'm not going to sit there and act like once I realized who it was that I didn't pay attention. But one of my friends was very close to him. He kind of like, I would say I'm not going to say he ran the block because it was a couple guys in there on his same type of status. But he was one of those guys, man, that, you meet him and you knew he was different. For an example, we were juveniles. They used to house the juveniles in this one particular block where all the high profile gangsters and killers were. All right. It was called North One. And we used to always, the juveniles, we used to stay in so much trouble, fighting, stabbing, gambling, fucking with the police, that the adult men down there that had things to do, whether it was money, lawyers, phone calls, whatever it was, they used to try to keep us cool, to say in the least. And one of the interactions that I had with Wayne was that he used to send us things, cigarette, pizza, weed, soda, stuff like that, because he knew some of us, and he knew, like, Wayne had a connection with some of these guys. Keep in mind, I just gave you this kid and this child term, right? But in all actuality, that the 15, 16, 17-year-olds there, we were quote unquote the most violent in the city, which is why we were in their charge as an adult. Okay. So I do want to use that term as kid, but we some of us had done some things. But anyway, nevertheless, Wayne was a different type of dude. He was in the paper. He was on the front page of the paper and all in the newspaper all that time. It was on the screen on the news when we came in there. We all knew him, and I won't even lie. Some of us looked up to him. Some of us was on a trajectory that, we wanted to be gangsters and killers, and we wanted to be known like that. I mean, and some of those guys, particularly that you asked me about Wayne, they right there. So you end up meeting those guys, which is another detriment of sending kids to adult prison, because you act like you're going to straighten them out and allow them to rehabilitate themselves, or allow the system to rehabilitate them. But technically, I learned more about being a gangster, killing a street guy, being in prison. And being around, like, I don't want to blame that on a Wayne Perry, because I don't want to mix that in with the answer that I gave you for the question. But you meet people like that housed in adult places.
Do you ever look back? Do you ever look back now and think like, did any of them ever say to you like, is this really what you want? Do you want to be like, do you want this for your life? Like,
yeah, I had a relative that asked me that all the time.
Yeah, I'm basically, say to them like, obviously I'm never coming home or something, but like, is this really what you want? You're a young man, because look, I've talked to people that say like, I wish I would have had like, I wish I would have met this person years ago that maybe they could have told me to stay out of this shit, or, you know?
To be honest with you, I look back at that. I even work with young men that demand to follow in my footsteps all the way up to not going to prison, right? But it was something in me that was attracted to the lifestyle of the streets. I'm not gonna say that I wanted to be a killer or I wanted to be a gangster or a kingpin or something, but the lifestyle of the streets was attractive to me. I was born a teenage parent, so I think I seen some things that you probably shouldn't see when you're very impressionable. I was attracted to the glitz and the glamour of the stuff and didn't realize what you had to go through to get it. By the time I realized what you had to go through to get it, I was already in prison. So I don't think Gandhi nor Martin Luther King, I don't think Jesus Christ could have came down here and told me, hey, this is not what you want, because everything that I seen that I want, the things that the guys were doing to get it is what I had to do to get it. Now, if somebody
I think that's why it's so alluring, you know?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're young now, if you know, like I used to meet guys that came to prison in their 40s, right? Their mentality, their adjustment was totally different than mine as a kid. I adjusted from childhood to man in there. And I don't want to make fun of the 35-year-old or the 40-year-old to come in there, but trust me, when they come in at that age, most of the time they losing an apartment, a house, a mortgage, they got kids, wives, businesses, all these type of things. Their loss is so much more different than when they come in, they are devastated, right? And I noticed that in the process of that when you come in as a kid, you don't really, that's not what you really go through. You adapt to what's going on in there, which is why I made those. That's why I alluded to what you were around. You dig what I'm saying? So, everything was totally different for me from that perspective. But going back to being a kid, I would have never known those things that the 35 or the 40-year-old know, where they could look back and say, even some guys that is in that age range, I know that I met, that they knew when to stop. Like I never had enough time to figure out if it was really what I wanted to do or not. I mean, and science and law have now agreed that the brain does not fully develop until about 25 to 26 years old, which is why a lot of my friends are now coming home from prison for mistakes that we made as children, teenagers, right? So I think that also alludes to the question. I don't want to get all scientific on you, but I didn't have the faculties at 16 to see far enough down the road to even say that, yo, I might not want to do this right here.
Well, yeah, and I brought that up also because I'd recently done some stuff on a guy called Nudie Mims. You may have heard of him.
Yeah, from Philadelphia, right?
Yeah. And
he was a part of that crew that came to DC and killed all the Muslims, allegedly, right?
Yes, the Ron Harvey crew, those guys, and he was in Graterford, and there was talk from a lot of folks that he did do what he could to talk to younger people. He was
spread all over. I heard about him, and I've never been there, so I heard that. So they got to be strong.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get in a little bit to the time you did it. What was the first federal prison you went to? Do you remember?
Yeah, hell yeah. First federal prison I went into, I didn't go on the compound. It was Colorado, because we were going on what you call, we were in a layover. But to answer your question, that was where I first put my feet down, right? And I matter of fact, I do that in reverse. The first federal prison I really was in was a penitentiary called Lee County, but I stopped at a couple penitentiaries on the way there. But to answer your question, my first bid was in Lee County, USP.
Where'd you spend the most time?
To be honest with you, I never stayed anywhere longer than 3 or 4 years. Okay, so
where
I did 3 years
in. Where was that?
I did 3 years in Lawton. I did like 13 months in Ohio. That was a murderous jump. You might want to talk about that. Then I went to New Mexico for about 30 days. We couldn't stay there. From there, I went to Arizona. I stayed in Arizona for 3 years. From Arizona, I stopped in Colorado for like a weekend. I stopped in Leavenworth for like a summer. We stopped in Memphis for another weekend, stopped in Petersburg for a weekend, and then I stayed at this place called Sussex, Virginia for about 18 months. Then I went to Lee County, Virginia for 4 years, and then I went to Gilmer, West Virginia for 3 years, and then I came home.
Wow. And you ultimately came home in 2010, is that correct?
Correct.
I want to ask you, because 1993 to 2010, it might be, as far as technology, like you go from going in, nothing about it. There's no phones, there's no, computers. In 2010, you come home, the internet is a thing. You can watch films. You have this phone in your hand that you can, FaceTime anybody in the world. What was that adjustment like?
Well, let me remind you, I had all type of computer skills, Microsoft skills from prison. I didn't do all my time in federal prison. I did some of my time in these private prisons. So in some of these places I've been in, we had computers and PlayStations. And I don't have to tell you, you're educated. We had access to cell phones. So some of these things I did know how to use before I got out. But the majority of it was probably challenging. But the basic skills that you learn from using the older computers that we were using in the late 90s in prison, I think I paid. Listen, I was a video game kid. All right.
Okay.
And I think me being a video game kid and speaking spell and all those things, I think those things gave me some mechanical skills that never left. And when I first touched the cell phone in the prison, when I first got on one of the big goofy computers in the prison, once the people told me the beginning of how you do everything, some of those other skills clicked in. That's on something that I would say is rudimentary. But by the time I got to a Mac or all these other things that I had to do now, it was a little challenging, but I'm a good hands-on type of person. And if I hop in the car with my girlfriend or my sister, they was just showing me 1, 2, 3, ABC. I was also the engineer at a recording studio in Arizona where people from outside the institution came in to teach me how to run all the boards and stuff that's in a modern day studio now. So I say all that stuff to say to you that I had some technical skills that your average guy that was just in a cell for 17 years may not have.
I got you. Okay, well that helps. It's and also again, I mean, it's not like you went in like the 60s or 70s where like you come home in 2010. It's totally
no, because I didn't want to correct you. I had the big New Jack City phone.
Yeah,
but that's nothing like what you're talking about. So that
I mean, phones went from like that to like where they are now. It's pretty unbelievable. So I want to ask you. So obviously, you do a lot of content. You have a great Instagram page called DC Black.
Thank you.
And I think I really want you to answer this because I think there's this mystical thought that like the DC Blacks are this like high level gang and there's like all these people that run it, and it's really not like that. It's really just a group of people from DC and you kind of, a lot of them just banded together. And look, obviously there's a lot of mainstream talk due to like Tommy Silverstein, and I'll ask you this first. Just tell me a little bit of the DC Blacks. And there's also contention, obviously, with the Cadillac Smith stuff with Tommy Silverstein. Silverstein claims that what started that was they say he killed this guy, Robert Chappelle.
Who is not from DC.
Okay, right. And Silverstein claims, till his death that he did not do that. He's innocent of that crime. And Cadillac Smith essentially was friends with this guy and he marked him for death. And Silverstein says he just kind of got to Smith before Smith got to him. I guess just tell me a little bit about the history and kind of how that whole thing and all of this stuff happened with the AB.
All right. I wasn't there. I researched it and all that, so we could get that out the way first, right? But I think I've talked to enough. I'm certain that I've talked to enough people that were there and that are still alive to have an understanding to give you an opinion on it. All right. Now, before we got to talking, you said that you knew Pete Early, so you've talked to someone who's had in-depth accounts from one side to the other. Matter of fact, I'm gonna give Pete Early way more credit than that because Pete Early was actually cordial and friendly with the blacks on my side when he stayed in Leavenworth for that 60 days or 30 days while he did that first book. Let me give him. I'm a journalist. I admire journalism. Okay. With that being said, I don't believe Tommy Silverstein about the Chappelle thing for many reasons. Barry Mills, people that was on the 10, all this, but I will never play prosecutor anywhere. He said he ain't do it, he ain't do it. But nevertheless, some of the tension between Tommy Silverstein and Raymond Cadillac Smith ill, right, was because of that murder. Because I'm gonna use the word allegedly though, because I wasn't there though. No matter how firmly I believe what I'm telling you, I'm still using allegedly, okay? So allegedly when Cadillac came back from Lawton, because a lot of big time jailhouse legends from DC didn't belong in the Fed. So they bounced between federal system and back to Lawton. Every guy that was in the Feds back then, they aspired and desired and longed to get back to Lawton, because going to Lawton was almost like being home.
Mm-hmm.
When Cadillac came back this last time, when he ended up meeting his demise, with that situation with Silverstein and them, a lot of people don't know that he was what we call short. He was going home very soon, okay? But he was one of those guys, according to all the research I've done, that, he was an alpha male. He was also probably what we would consider now a shit starter. I mean, I'm going to get some flack for that, but we keeping it real. And he did not like the fact that there were some black men, not necessarily from DC, and I'm not going to call them out, but I know their names. Some black men that were thorough and legendary and respected from where they were from, that were on the tier and in the place, and they were going to go testify in the realm of a convict, right? And we can get into this conversation later too, but right now I'm just giving you the answer. They were going to go as witnesses for Tommy Silverstein and Clayton Fountain to say that they did not commit the murder. In universal terms, there's nothing wrong with that, people. All right. They was trying to, it's convict and convict against the man, and that it don't matter black or white. Cadillac allegedly had a problem that any brother in here going to testify for these crackers going to have a problem with me.
Gotcha.
And that's where I believe the real problem came from. I think that's the answer to your question, unless you want me to go beyond.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. I didn't know that about Mr. Smith as far as some of that. So would you agree that, because I think the thought always is like the AB, DC blacks, it's a totally racial thing.
Okay.
Now, obviously, I think you've kind of just alluded by what you said there that most of those individuals, it's not like they didn't like white people. They were willing to help a guy in prison that didn't do something. Were there some people that maybe were racist and some weren't? Because like I know people that have been the AB. They may be racist, some may not be. Like
emphatically, some were, but not all. And let me give you a story. I actually went into this story a little bit on Chad Mark's channel one time. Nobody ever seemed interested to ask me about it again. But I interviewed a homie of mine, a elder homie, an original DC black, because we haven't even gotten to that term yet, Jeff. But an original one that the feds put that term on. His name is Butch Woods, Walter Wood. He and John Greshner, although John Greshner's a rat now, he and John Greshner were friends. John Greshner did an interview on a guy's channel that I don't want to mention because I don't like him, but he said something on it that a lot of people probably thought he was lying about. He said some disparaging things about me, and you can imagine why. We're going to skip that. I don't even mind, all right? But when he said the disparaging things about me, he put me in a category with the youngest. Technically, I'm not the youngest. I'm the middle-aged type of guy, right? But he spoke and said that those older DC guys were my friends. He is not lying. Butch Woods and a couple other guys, I'm not going to mention their name that's alive because they may feel some type of way now that all the bad blood. But I know for a fact, and nobody going to say nothing bad about me saying this, that they traded drugs. They traded coffee. They were friends. They may not have passed a knife, okay? Don't get me twisted. I've never heard none of them walking down and robbing something together in the feds, because you know that happened. I never heard of John Greshner or Barry Mills saying, "Hey, DC black guy, give me a knife." I'm not going on. I'm talking about convict friendship, but he used the word friend. John Greshner used the word friend. Flower Sellies with Snebble.
Edgar
Snail, Fly, Keith Gaffney Bay, who he was then, who became Khalif Mujahid, right? Was Sellies in Leavenworth with Edgar the Snail. People think that you can never been Sellies with them. Right. Now, before tension built, Tommy Silverstein and what they called the California crew, before they was even known as the ABs, did come there. And he eventually migrated to the cells with his kind. But at the whole time, they were friends. Even they were cool. All the way up to now, after the war, Fly and all these other DC guys were in ADX with Barry Mills, TD Bigham, and Edgar the Snail, and a couple other guys. Even Tommy Silverstein came off of that total isolation, although he never came out with anyone. My point is that some of this shit is blown out of proportion, just like what you're saying. But
well, I think like we'll talk about in a bit, it's sensationalized. It's a racial,
and I don't want to make it like it's not as serious as it is.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's just, we hear the word Aryan, right? For instance, and like I'm white. I being in the street and being in prison race is totally different, right? In prison, as you know, you only hang out with whites, you only hang out with black. And in the real world, that would be obviously very bizarre and that would be considered racist. In there, it's totally different. And I think it's misconstrued that like these people they hate blacks or the blacks hate whites. Like it's that's just how prison is you can kind of suffice
in
to
the
say.
microcosm when you focus on it, but I did just give you stories when
Exactly.
blacks enter. Yeah.
Right. But it's like, as you said, like at the end of the day, like you're friends with your friends and
I mean, especially when it's tension like that, right? Like we went to the apex of violent conflict in prison, ABDC Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, like now, the same type of people are not even around each other. The AB is not a thing in the feds no more, not at no penitentiary level, right?
So yeah, because they're all so like spread out. And,
right. So like, you talk about all these other white groups, there are other strong white groups now, blah, 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 but that's another conversation. I'm just saying that at the tension, at that level, once Tommy Silverstein and Clayton Fountain killed Cadillac, for the real DC guy, who they were labeled as DC, like some people just got locked up in DC. When you're saying DC Black now or then, when you're saying DC Blacks now or then, you are not talking about everyone that has a 007 number, 016 number. These are the Fed numbers that they give guys from where I'm from. That does not encompass all the people that are from there. People want to act like it does. Back then, most of the people that were DC Blacks were the Moorish Americans that it came from Lawton's system and didn't give a F about anyone. Administration, AB, Mexican, that was a different breed of black man, period. That breed of black man began to be watered down as time went on, and the term DC Black still was there. As the Lawton crew, or the crew before me, which was the young people that got caught up in the early 90s war on drugs, people like Anton White, or right after Tony Lewis. These are some names of the people that didn't do Lawton time, although they made it pass through there, but they got sentenced to federal prison. The group of people that was there were just the ones that's not going for. You may have 600 DC guys on the compound. If something big goes on and SIS comes to get somebody, SIS don't go get 600 people. They go get who they believe is the problem, and the problem is who they call the DC Blacks.
Right, and it's a way to just characterize them as a group, and it's nowadays
I mean, and what somebody doing at Water may not even affect somebody in Coleman unless a friend of a friend is there. Like people be thinking that it's really a game. See, like one thing that they don't understand, I believe that the Aryan Brotherhood probably never totaled over 500 people. It's always about 10,000 or plus DC guys. Rhetorically, do anybody believe that unless the AB was Superman's, that 400 people would ever be able to combat 10,000 people all over the whole United States in 120 some prisons is already outrageous. Right. So the people that was really active in the ABDC thing, it probably was fewer DC guys active than ABs. Now that's arguable. So I'm just throwing that out there because now I'm revealing, or I'm emphasizing the fact that out of 10,000 to 8,000 people that was there, not all those people was active. Out of 200 people on the compound, when something happened outside of Marion, because we know Marion only has 36 people in that whole unit, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Or at least on that side, it's probably 18 cells on each tier, something like that. I forgot the number, but
and you're talking about control unit.
Yeah, and control unit. But when you get to Lewisburg and Leavenworth, and even Atlanta, back then when those was penitentiaries, the guys that were violently active and unruly were not every single person from the District of Columbia.
Right, and what would put Silverstein into the predicament that he ultimately was in is because he ended up killing a guard who he had a personal issue with, and
Merle Klutz.
Yeah, Merle, yep. And then ADX was built in the 90s, and that's really where Silverstein's life was documented. I want to ask you about Marion and some of your research that you've done and talking to some of the people that you've talked to. I mentioned at the beginning, there's always been this question of what exactly happened to John Gotti in Marion. Now, obviously, I think, as you've been around many federal joints. I've always equated it to like when John Gotti went to Marion, he was public enemy number one in terms of this government, and they threw him in the worst place possible. And John Gotti was pretty much on his own, right? I mean, he didn't have it wasn't like he was at Danbury or some FCI where he could have friends and that sort of thing. He was kind of on his own. And I guess, as far as what do you know happened to John Gotti?
let me give you two aspects of John Gotti. But before I do that, let me just give you a disclaimer of how I feel about John Gotti, okay? John Gotti is a gangster. As a kid, when I was ignorant, I looked up to all gangsters. Then I discovered that John Gotti had racist tendencies, so I began to not care nothing about John Gotti at a later point in time. So I'm just saying that to say that I don't want it to seem like, oh, I'm praising him, but he was a gangster. He never told all the way to the end of the road. And in a gangster's world, in the street world, that is what it is.
Respectable, right?
All right, boom. Now with that out the way.
Well, I also will say I'm not a gangster, and I even find it respectable, right? To the point
he walking like he talking.
Yeah, and it's hard to say to someone, hey, you're getting 100 years, you're never coming home. But if you just tell us what happened, we'll let you out and you can go home. It's very few people are built like that, so it's respectable in that term.
You said it correctly. Now, before I go into the story that you specifically asked me about, that people ask about all the time, I talked to another buddy of mine. I'm not gonna say his name, but he spent about 7 years there. All the years that he spent there, John Gotti was there before he got sick. One of my buddies, a black urban kingpin, violent, whatever they say. You know how they do the black guys with the Ricos.
Mm-hmm.
But John Gotti got the same type of Rico with the murder. And so it's the exact same, but a black person. Correct myself. Mm-hmm. But at one point in time, John Gotti, when you said alone, La Cosa Nostra, Mafia style, he was alone. But he was with bona fide, tough white convicts. Cool. And they got into something with black convicts, which mostly was DC guys. And when it was time to come out, although no one was stabbed in these first encounters, he fought. And my man said, he said, before you do any of that YouTube stuff on John Gotti, he said, man, I ain't kidding nothing about none of them. He said, but I did something to him. I mean, in all actuality, he said he locked horns with John Gotti. He dropped John Gotti in this particular fight. So now he gonna know that I'm telling the story, but I ain't saying his name. And I believe this occurred when all the black guys from DC were housed on what was called E-Range in an overpopulation joint. And the white guys and the homies got into it. Nobody was stabbed, but he said that he dropped John Gotti. But he did say that John Gotti didn't run, didn't check in, and wasn't going for nothing. And he said, by the way, he said, I was like 29, 30 years old. He said John Gotti was already in his 50s. So he said, keep that in mind as well. We got to keep that in mind as I go to the part you asked me about. When he did get punched in the face and dropped, I don't believe he got knocked out. People saying he got knocked out. To me, knocked out is knocked out cold. In a boxer's world, a knockout is nothing. But in the penitentiary, somebody knocked you out. That's a big, big stain on your record. Like, I know people who commit 187s because they got knocked out. Anyway, he did not get knocked out. He got knocked to the ground. Mm-hmm. All right. And he got knocked to the ground by this guy, Walter Johnson, that everybody know. And a lot of people always say that DC try to take credit for Walter Johnson. Let me explain a little teeny bit about Walter Johnson, right?
He's from Philadelphia, actually.
He's from Philadelphia, but he has ties to Washington, D.C. Not because when he got out, he came back to Washington, D.C. and allegedly committed another crime, but he walked away from some type of halfway house community service place in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania. Allegedly stole or robbed something, had maybe almost $100,000. He hid it in Washington, D.C. He was turned in Washington, D.C. His federal number is 007. So it's not that Washington, D.C. is trying to claim him. He has mixed the jurisdictions by committing crimes or getting caught for committing crimes in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. Now, he's black and he's Muslim. Automatically, he's going to have an interaction with the D.C. guys. Just so happened at the point in time when he had this conflict with John Gotti, there were more D.C. black people, not D.C. blacks, D.C. black convicts, okay? I'm only doing that to separate it from a gang. So, Walter Johnson is a convict's convict. The men respect him, whether you're from St. Louis or California, in the black convict thing. He felt disrespected that the white boys who were supposed to be, and it wasn't ABs. They keep saying it was ABs. The people that was there said that it was the dirty white boys, Big Mac and somebody else, and a couple other guys. It may have been a AB sympathizer. They said it wasn't the ABs technically. And I'm going to give you the reason why. Don't let me forget it. When it gets to ADX, this is where it comes out into my knowledge. Anyway, they said that they was governing a bench and only John Gotti could sit there. DC dudes and Philly dudes, blacks. I'm going to speak for both of us. We don't give a F about none of that prison stuff unless it's a line drawn to this respect. If you tell a guy from Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. that he can't sit nowhere because a white or Mexican or another black person said you can't, That's gonna be one of the first conversations. According to Fly was there. He put his hands on John Gotti, knocked John Gotti to the ground, and a bunch of things kicked off, right? And even after that, it still hadn't involved the DC guys because Henry Little Man James kicked off the next thing with the blacks and the whites did. It kind of changed everything and changed the dynamics. The reason why I said it really wasn't the ABs, because by the time the word got to ADX, Barry Mills asked Fly, I thought we had a truce. Y'all moved on us in Marion. Fly said that the word came back from Marion that we didn't move on y'all in Marion. We moved on the dirty white boys. Just so happened, it got all mixed up and a whole bunch of other things happened. And I go into some of that in those interviews. But the thing with Walter Johnson happened about them telling him he couldn't sit on the bench because it was John Gotti's bench. That's the way I got it.
One thing I will say, and I find this interesting, there was a AB case in the early 2000s, I believe 2002-ish, in that count 51, I believe.
Was you talking about the RICO?
Yeah.
I read that. Count 51 is what?
Conspiracy to kill Walter Johnson.
Right. Walter Johnson, Titus Webster, Abdul Jonah Salam, Khalif Abdul Majid, all of them is in one alone.
Yeah, there was
exactly what you're talking about.
And there was an individual, I believe his name was Kevin. He cooperated. He claimed that he was given a bullet with one gun, or a gun with one bullet, and that was to take. Yeah, that was to take out Walter Johnson. Now again, that came out in that trial.
But remember that the people that's those are rats that are doing. Not to say that you're wrong, but those rats did say anything.
And that's why I will, and that's why I will say, you know, everything that individuals in the stand say has to be taken with a grain of salt. It's their word. I guess I'd ask you, if you were someone like John Gotti in Marion, do you think it's possible that he may have had some sort of agreement with a group to like help him out?
Highly possible. Okay. That's what I want to add. Highly possible. But I want people to understand how much con goes on in prison. I want people to understand how intellectually masterminded that people like Barry Mills was at that time. The streets is John Gotti's world. The prison is Barry Mills in them world. Barry Mills and them could have had John Gotti believing that he was protected. He could have had John Gotti believing that we're going to smash them NIGGERs, right? And it could have all been game because they didn't give a F about Gotti either. They would have squeezed him as well. Just as the rumor came out that it was a hit for Walter Johnson, although the person testified to that. But let's not forget that Barry Mills and them used a mentally deranged, sexually perverted person to take the murder beef for another thing for Tommy Silverstein and them. And people don't know that they basically told him to cooperate and protected him from not being a cooperator because it was con. People don't understand the real criminal mind. People understand these people who just get locked up and go to jail, but there's another breed of criminal that is really the mastermind, the thinker. So I say all that to say that John Gotti could have thought that he had the protection of them, but Walter Johnson has never been touched.
Yeah, it's always just been a rumor, sure.
And I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm just giving you the other spin.
And by the way, as you mentioned, I mean, Walter Johnson is serving life in ADX currently.
This minute.
For a completely separate crime involving of something else.
The killing of a Metro Transit police officer in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, very sad. Very sad. So let's kind of transfer to some of the stuff that you've worked on. I find it really interesting. I want to talk about the Joey Merlino story that came out. But I
Joey Merlino.
Yeah, shout out to him. I want to play a little game with you, okay? And I want to ask you some questions because I think you're a good figure to answer this. In the mob tube world, which is what they call it, which is what I'm in, there's been a real question as to what a informant or rat is, okay? So you and I'm not a criminal, but I've kind of feel like I understand it enough. Any person that testifies on other people or puts people into crimes and documents is a cooperator. There are people on the internet that have moved the goalpost on what that is. Now it's, well, you could talk to the police, but as long as you don't testify, you're not a rat. And there's all these different things. So, and why this came up is I've done videos on, I believe John Gotti Jr. is a cooperator. He sat with the government in 2005 and did a 5-page CO2 where he talks about various crimes involving murder and other things that his family have stated that he's not a cooperative because he didn't testify against anybody. He went to 5 trials, which he did. Absolutely. But again, would you say talking to the police that way is no good?
Talking to the police about something that somebody else is doing is no good. In the federal penitentiary, we talking about certain rules and not being able to move the goalposts. If John Gotti did a proffer, what's a 302? I don't know what's that term.
It's a proffer session.
Oh, I didn't know the term of it, but I know what a proffer.
Yeah, 302 is 302 is a document that it's basically a log of what's said during.
It's a document of the proffer. No,
correct.
I just wanted to make sure we was on the same page before I put my foot in my mouth. But back to the question: if he did a proffer, and the proffer included anything other than just him saying something about himself to plead guilty to it, is incorrect, and it is ratting and cooperating. I'm not going to get into. I see right now in the Italian gangster community and in the Black urban community, it's been a big discrepancy between informant, cooperator, confidential informant, and rat. Let me say this. This what Eyone got to say. A rat, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got on the stand, okay? Because people keep saying there's a big difference between getting on the stand and not getting on the stand. I just want to make this one point before I go on. A person that got on the stand is already an informant as well. So let's stop defining all these words as different because some of them can overlap. A regular informant that goes to trial and testifies with somebody, if you want to make it be a rat once he get on the stand, he's still a rat and he's still an informant. So with me saying all that, let me just get back to what I'm saying. If you talk to the police about anything other than yourself and you're from the criminal background world, you are cooperating, and cooperating is ratting whether you get on the stand on that. Right now, I got a dude that cooperated against me that never got on the stand. Do you think for 1 second he's not a rat to me? He's in my paperwork saying Eyone had this weapon. He put this weapon here. His ratting and cooperating in my discovery was 75% of me pleading guilty.
Right. That's what I've tried to contend. Now I want to ask you, and if you don't, it's okay. I have page 1 of the 302. I guess I'll play this game now. Are these situations cooperator behavior? If you cooperate against the police, is that acceptable?
If you cooperate against the police.
So let's say you do what Frank Lucas did.
Hold on. Frank Lucas cooperated against the police that was in criminal activity.
That's what I'm saying.
Me. However, and you can iron it out if I say something wrong and you know something different, but with Freeway Ricky Ross and the Freeway Ricky Ross task force, he did something against them, but allegedly it was to prove that they weren't correct in something that they did to him. Now, I mean, are we on the same page with that?
Yeah, I guess my question more is like, if let's say you and I are doing crime and we know that there's a
Eppolito, you remember them?
Yes, of course.
Those are real criminal police. If you testify against them, you're a rat.
Okay, that's my point.
Would that answer your question?
Yes, 100%.
All right, now, if you testify against the police that's breaking the law and y'all in the criminal activity, then all the criminal codes go with it. Now, if I have a police that planted a weapon on me and I get it to a point where as though I can open and argue it in court, one thing that's going to be different, you will never be able to argue for the government against the police anyway. You would only be able to defend yourself. Now, I mean, if we outside of criminal stuff, if you get what I'm saying, if the police plant a gun on me and I'm defending myself and I'm going to trial and I'm the defendant, that automatically is moot, right?
That's different. Sure. Okay. Let's say you're at an airport. Let's say you're at the airport the day September 11th happened and you heard 2 hijackers in the bathroom discussing what they were going to do. Are you a rat if you go to the police about that?
If you're from the streets, yeah, you're a rat. Okay. If you see, I mean, I'm using streets because I'm talking Black urban culture, right? But if you was an Italian gangster and you heard it, right? If you didn't vigilante do something to stop it to say, yo, fuck the police, I'm not dying on this plane.
Hold on, Eyone. Let's say you did and you saved, thousands of people from dying. I mean, would we be willing
to... You say thousands of people from down to see where you're going, so I ain't going to allow myself to fall into that trap, just make myself look like a villain. But whenever Big Tony...
You answered it correctly, actually. I mean, this is my point here. If you're going to be a criminal, we have to be an equal opportunity understander of how it all works. If your last name is Gotti, that does not preclude you from being anything, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said, dang, I understand what you're asking me.
Yeah. I'm glad you answered it the way you did. So the Joey Merlino stuff, this has been a hot button issue the last month or so. A person called
Crazy
Scott
too,
Burns.
man. It happened like 20-some years ago, right?
Well, but you got to understand, man, like Joey Merlino's a big name. These guys, and look, I've been called a Joey apologist. People say I work for Joey. They say that I do shows and he tells me what to do. The show's on. I've never worked for anyone. I do my own thing. But I will say the individual that put this recent thing out, Scott Bernstein, is a known sensationalist. He has claimed all sorts of things that have happened that have not. He has no proof of it. He calls himself an expert on Jerry Merlino. He's never even met the guy, so I don't know how he could be a Merlino expert. But he essentially states that Mr. Merlino paid people to not extort him, basically. And you had talked about in your video, he connected it to certain Latin criminal groups. He connected to Gerard Prince Miller and the Supreme Team. He's done all sorts of things. I guess my question to you is, when you saw the video, what were your first thoughts, and what did you ultimately find when you looked into it?
My first thoughts was I was surprised because before I started doing this YouTube stuff and even my own journalism, right, I look at certain names like Ethan Brown and different type of people that were from another racial background that cover other things. I kind of was trying to understand where they was coming from, which led me into discovering Scott Bernstein, right? And I had nothing bad to say about him before. And even when I did my video, like I can be a little obnoxious on my social media platform sometimes, but I didn't get into the goofy stuff with him. I just said my point was that his journalism was a little bit off, but I said it privately to myself, to one of my buddies. I said, I think he maybe just been sensationalizing. And you used that word, so I kind of relate to that. So my first thing was I was surprised. And then I said, you know what? If he's a Joey Merlino expert, then I'm definitely a prison expert, because everything he's saying is totally incorrect. And I know it from mine, not from research. So that's one thing that I did. I felt and I thought about it when I saw it. And I had just watched the Philadelphia versus the Mafia documentary on Netflix. So I was in the mood to talk about it anyway. I was just texting Joey about Johnny Visa and Ralph Natali and those guys, like, oh, I see it. Like I was just texting them in person. I mean, you know, in real life. And I just thought it was a bunch of BS, right? In regards to Scott Bernstein. And I know that he mentioned, excuse me, I want to make sure that the phone don't, I'm plugging the phone back.
No, you're good.
But I wanted to make sure that I remembered and addressed that he mentioned that the Mexican Mafia was involved. I hate when they sensationalize and make the Mexican Mafia wasn't involved, and they weren't even a factor on the compound in that prison at that time. Now, I thought to myself, I said, well, he tried to say, oh, he got write-ups and reports and this. And another thing that he said that I want to touch on right here. He said that there's proof that money was being sent from Philadelphia to New York.
Well, hold on a second. Well, and here's another thing. Then Scott, show it then.
How can you prove that?
Because I get a lot of problem with this. This is something that is a major problem in the mob genre community, where people just say things. You know, there's a rumor, Eyone, that I called the FBI on Joey Merlino. There's a rumor out there. Now, there's no phone call. There's nothing. It's just someone says it, so it has to be believed. And you make a great point. How the hell would there be a document showing this? This was 20
and let me throw this out there, because one of my homies, we had a not on the line conversation, and he said, "Yeah, how you know that?" He said, "Man, so what? Did Slim said this and he said that and he said that? And you don't know for a fact?" I said, "He said this." He said, "What if he got proof the money was sent?" I said, "Well, Joey is allegedly a compulsive gambler. You don't think that he sent money out of the institution for something?"
Right, but like, also, Scott, I don't know if you know this, but Cash App and stuff, they weren't around then, so there would be no documentation that it was done through that. I guess you could allude to say that he sent money to New York, so it has to be an extortion payment. It's ridiculous.
But pin this here, though, Jeff. Scott would have to have proof coming from the institution
sure,
that He did, I forgot the name of it, the forms that you do when you send the money out.
Yeah.
I forgot what you call it. I've been out so
Western
long, but
Union.
I done sent it out 1,000 times.
Yeah.
He would have to have proof that the money was sent out, sent here, sent there. Freedom of information don't even get you that type of information. Where would he get that information from unless Joey caught a case that Gambino was accused, right, alleged, or extortion was alleged, and then the feds put it in there that money went here, and there. If he didn't get something like that, where did he get that?
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll challenge Scott. Scott, put that information out. Instead of just saying it happened, which this is a lot of what Scott does. He hears things through like a random person on a burner account on email and thinks that it's listen, we have caught him in multiple things where he has claimed someone did this. I've had people reach out and say, my father is blind and can't even leave his house. How would he do the stuff that Scott's saying he's done? So yeah, I would urge Scott, put that out, because you're I don't know if you know this, Scott, but you shouldn't tarnish people's reputation, because that could really give them a problem. And as you know, Eyone, and anybody that has any knowledge of Joey knows, I mean, Joey's pretty universally liked throughout multiple different types of cultures. He's looked at, regardless of whether you agree with his choices, he is someone who went to prison, didn't cooperate, and has become a bit of a kind of a person where people feel like they can talk to him about some of the issues that are not only hurting white people in prison, but black people and other people as well. So, Scott, I don't really know. I know why you're doing it, because again, it's cool to put Joey's name in titles and it gets you views and stuff. But I think you have to think a little bit further about what you're doing in certain instances with that.
I mean, and to be honest, I just want to add this one part. I don't know if you're moving on in that, but in black urban terms, Joey ain't no sucker. Like in our culture, you talking about somebody was sending somebody some money. That's a strike on honor. Like the brother that I met Joey through, you know what I'm saying, who I got a lot of love and admiration for, who got a lot of respect throughout the whole federal system. He spoke so high of Joey that I never even had to research him. Like, in these circuits that goes on among certain of these people in prison that hops racial boundaries, certain people are just not played with in certain type of ways. I'm not going to say that Joey or King Kong can't be attempted to be extorted, but what's going to happen is going to be something totally different. And since now that everybody want to put the facts out, even with some truth and falsehood mixed, the person that was playing with him got blasted. Not only the person that was, and if you don't understand my black lingo, he got the knife put in him in the jail. All right. And the Mexican Mafia wasn't a part of it. And Scott Bernstein saying Joey was there by himself. A man is never alone. You understand? For Scott Bernstein don't understand nothing about the prison politics.
Well,
man is never alone, huh?
But here's the thing, and Scott literally does know. He does know this. Joey is very widely connected, and for years has been friends with all sorts of black people in Philadelphia, for instance. And it's pretty public. He was very close to Tracy Mason and all sorts of people. So, Scott, I mean, I find it wildly ridiculous that you would post this anyway, just because you do know that. Like, I don't know why you would think that it's okay to say that. And it's, you know, it's not surprising because he's done it before. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. And as you alluded to in the video, the guy that supposedly this happened with, he got a pretty bad end for himself. So
yeah, I mean, and no disrespect to get into New York business, it had residual effects and other people lost their lives.
All right.
And Joey, Scott Bernstein, I'm talking to you. Joey Merlino was not in Beaumont when Big C died. So stop implicating him in a goddamn homicide. Fuck is you, police? He wasn't even there when Big C died. He wasn't even there. He was fighting that New Jersey case. He wasn't even in the institution.
Yeah. Listen, what him and I do is not exactly easy. You have to be very careful with wording. But this is one of the reasons I stopped dealing with Scott, just because he insinuates a lot of stuff that I think's wrong. Like, for instance, when you came out from prison, I think your goal was to move on with your life and try to do something good and positive. You know, Scott will do stuff like someone will get out of prison and he'll just say, yeah, he's right back holding court at this place. And it's like, you don't know that. Like, you shouldn't be saying shit like that.
Nah, I wouldn't say anything like that.
Yeah, it's not right. But I do want to ask you before we end about, you know, you've written books. I know you wrote some really interesting books about Lorton, you know, some fiction and things like that. I know you wrote a book about Eddie Mathis. Is that correct?
it's an ebook, so technically it would have been it would have been like a novella, but
yeah. But more my question, you've written stuff, you've created some of these YouTube stuff, you've done the different Instagrams. I guess, did you want to just kind of teach the history and kind of keep the memory alive of a lot of these people and kind of try to
use the term preserve the history, right?
Yeah.
I'm not far. I used to use the term preserve the culture, but the way you and some other people cover, what you call it, M2?
Mob tube.
My bad. Mob tube?
Yeah.
I'm a young guy that looked up to the black gangsters and the urban legends of from where I'm from.
Yeah.
And as I began to change my life, I had to struggle with what perspective to put that in. And what I mean by that is glorification or education or just remembering of history, right? And I began writing articles with Don Diva, and that morphed into all this other stuff. So yeah, I do want people to remember some of the street culture and the black urban culture, because some of the people that made a lot of changes from where I'm from were some of these guys. And also, on a more down-to-earth tip, it's something that I like. I watch this same type of coverage of Italian gangsters, Jewish gangsters, black gangsters. I watch military history. I like history, and I see that it was a lane for me to be able to present myself as almost an expert in some things that I know well, because evidently there's a bunch of people like Scott Bernstein that are self-proclaimed experts. And once I realized that, I said, well, hey, I got some things to say as well.
Yeah.
So some of it was just a natural flow.
Yeah, it kind of melds together too. So it's a good kind of union. I got two more questions and we'll get you out of here. One of which I ask pretty much every person I have on this channel. I've made no bones about it. I've interviewed people that have cooperated. I've interviewed people that haven't. I've tried to kind of give everybody a voice. The question I have, though, I don't know that I've ever asked anyone but one person, but I think you're a good person to ask. Let's say, God forbid, in a week, I'm indicted by the FBI for tax fraud, let's say. God forbid. I plead, I'm going to go to federal prison. Now, obviously, I speak about a lot of people on here. Do you think I would have a hard time in prison, or they wouldn't really worry about me? Really?
I don't think you had no hard time in prison. If you went there for tax evasion, more than likely you're not going to one of the tough.
Well, let's say, let me say it like this. Let's say I go to a yard where there are mob guys and stuff, and do you think that I would have a problem there?
And you don't cover what you cover on the internet?
No, I do.
Regular guy?
No, let's say I do cover.
Oh, well, if you didn't say something bad about a mob guy, it could be a confrontation. But I've seen people go to prison with far bigger problems. I think you would be all right. I think you would find friends. I think you would learn how to mind your business. Now, if you went to one of those places where people die,
yeah,
it could be different. But I'm gonna say this, and I hope no mob guys don't take no offense to me, right? But I'm gonna say this because
I know what you're gonna say.
Black guy, and I've been to some of these prisons where people die.
Yeah,
a mob guy. Oh, mob guys ain't dropped no bodies in a long time.
I know what you're gonna say. Yeah. I've heard that before. I mean, they're just those kind of guys are kind of lost. I get what you're saying.
Now, I'm not gonna say that a mob guy hasn't got somebody cracked, right? Or dropped. Like that could be possible, but that's not even a known thing. Like the mob guys lately and back in the day, they known for wanting to get some money, eat good, and stay out of trouble. They not known for being gladiators in there, and that's no disrespect. But I would like to know what another mob guy. I'm telling you, in my time in prison and my history of prison, mob guys try to do their time as easy as possible. It's not a whole bunch of mob guys that was chopping dudes up in the face. I can't think of one. I mean, even with people like Roy DeMeo and all these type of people, I've never seen those guys in penitentiaries. Jeff, have you heard of any?
Well, I mean, you would have like Tommy Patera, maybe.
That's the one that crushed Whitey Bulger.
No, that's Freddie Gias. No, Tommy.
Right, we got to give him credit. He didn't even use a knife. He bludgeoned him. So
yeah. No, I'm talking about.
Trying to think,
There's a guy, Tommy Karate. His name is. He's been in jail for years. I mean, he definitely did some of that stuff, but I mean, they're very few and far between. I mean,
when you think about like black, Mexican, and even white supremacists, it's a bunch of those gladiators. Like,
yeah,
you see them everywhere. But I ain't saying that it's not none, but I'm just saying most mafia guys that I knew that had a name, they didn't have to lift the finger. So I'm not disrespecting them. They were the real mafia guy out the Mario Puzo type books. They did not have to lift the finger, the ones I was around.
I think the various people that I've talked to that have been to prison have said all the same things. They kind of just stay to themselves, and they they just hang with each other, and they don't really get involved with anything.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna tell you a true story. I ain't gonna give you the specifics of it, but I got an old timer that spent 47 years in prison. He's mentioned by P. Early in the hot house by name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just to make it a little entertaining. Secretly, and I don't know punk type extortion stuff. Secretly, he and some of his close comrades protected high-ranking cartel and Italian mob bosses in Leavenworth in the 70s.
Wow.
And when I say protected, I mean you couldn't touch him. You couldn't say nothing to him. You couldn't think about extorting him.
It wouldn't surprise me. I think, the thought we have of the mafia in, the street, during the 70s, 80s, obviously it speaks for itself. But once, as you said, and I think you said it so eloquently, once you go in and you start dealing in prison with people that have been there forever and they're real criminal minds, they're manipulators, then you find out, okay, maybe in the streets I was something, but in here, that's a little different. And
it's
I think
another world. I mean, I like the way Barry Mills broke it down about the John Gotti thing. Like they understood he was the Dapper Don, but not in the BOP.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Final question. And I always ask this to people. I mean, looking back, take yourself back to 15, 16, 17-year-old, where you are now. Do you wish you would have made different decisions? Do you regret your life at all?
I don't really live with a bunch of regrets, but I do have some regrets. But nah, I'm not one of those guys that wish I would have went left and went right here and there. Like I may have a dream here and there about scenarios back in the day, and I think about it, but I've lived through so many things in my life. I don't know about everybody else, but in my life, I've lived through so many things. If I allow regrets to kind of hold me down, I just got too many of them. It will bog me all the way down. I live my life kind of like, to use a metaphor, I live my life like a football player. I'm on to the next play. Like I know that play might have been bad and you didn't make the cut and you didn't go deep enough, but listen, clock is running, it's third and long and we need a first down.
It's a good way to look at it.
Joey Merlino, a little snuff. That's my sports joint.
Okay. You're a sports bettor.
No, I ain't a sports bettor. I'm just a sport analyzer.
Well, I love that. And I'm a gambler myself. So I've known, I don't know if you know, I've known Snuff since we were young. I've known.
Man, tell Snuff I want to holler at him. I need to holler at Snuff. My man Anton White, who introduced
Well, Snuff's a big timer now. He's a big timer now. Snuff's a big timer.
Snuff, I want to get with him.
Okay. I will. I'll make the call for you. Sure. Okay, beautiful. Well, look, I will say, Eyone, I don't think this is the last time we'll have you on. Maybe we'll have you on. We'll talk about some different things about prison. I've always wanted to talk to somebody about some of the daily the daily life, like what's gambling like, what's the different things like. I'm sure there's burning questions that we all have about prison, and maybe you can come on again and we could talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff. But I really want to
know. I want to put something in your head before you go too.
Yeah.
I'm researching. I always thought that there were no mob ties in the District of Columbia, right?
No, there's a guy, Joseph Nessline. Look into him.
I just discovered him, and it was connected to some Genovese stuff. I thought maybe we could talk about that privately, or maybe in another
Absolutely. Show. Yeah, there was also, there was a Baltimore crew, Gambino Crime Family, Baltimore crew.
I saw that too. I saw that when
they kind of were in unison with like Julius Salisbury and the Jewish mob that was in Baltimore at the time. DC again, it's more just like there were like Sicilian pizzerias that were moving drugs and things, but no, Nessline was a pretty interesting figure.
He went to jail for contempt of court for not talking, right?
Correct.
I just ran across. All right, that's
he was a real character from what I understand.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll talk about that. Absolutely. I really appreciate you. And I want to let everybody know, I'm going to include your links in the comments, pin comment. Everybody go check everything out. You're doing a lot of good stuff with DC Blacks, and your YouTube channel, you got some great interviews on there about, John Gotti and ADX and all this different stuff with all these different people. So
yeah, I always tell people that the famous John Gotti diamond chain is in Northeast DC.
Well, that's another point. Yeah, you did a video on a chain that John Gotti had that was snatched off of him.
With the Walter Johnson stuff. Walter Johnson made it all the way to Colorado with the chain.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
But let me just add one more disclaimer right there.
Yeah.
Somebody made a comment that bothered me. They said, "E, you only talking about somebody took Gotti chain. Gotti was 60-some years old." So I keep remembering that Gotti was an old man and Walter Johnson was in his 30s. Like, I do want to say that John Gotti was an old man.
Yeah, and John Gotti, I mean, John Gotti was born
and he fought and he didn't tell.
Yeah, I don't think there's nobody in their right mind that would say John Gotti wasn't a tough guy, gangster. But remember, he was born in 1940. And yes, look, there are prison wiretapped conversations where he uses words that he should not be using. Now, again, do I believe that he was racist? No, I don't. I think he probably, like a lot of old people, used words that we don't use today, and he thought it was acceptable.
I got a grandfather that used to say, "Some people are a man of their time."
Exactly.
I mean, I'm doing what you're doing, whatever. Really.
And listen, there are a lot of older people that might say things to a beautiful woman that you probably shouldn't say now.
I mean, you see, I said rainbow. When I was growing up, you used a totally different word.
Well, yeah. And we, again, like, you could say gay. It's okay.
I wasn't thinking about gay, though.
Okay. Oh, really?
I was thinking about the other word that you can't use.
Oh, transsexual.
3-letter word.
Oh, yeah. No, that's why I knew what you didn't want to say. I'm glad you didn't. Because listen, I mean, do we care? No, but
no, I don't care, but I know not to use
might,
the word.
You know? Okay. Well, look, I'm glad you did. You're a very well-spoken guy. You know what not to say. So that's important. Everybody go check out Eyone. Go check out everything he's doing. We're definitely going to have you back. And I'm glad you were able to at least talk a little bit about the Joey thing. Because that was really bothering me. I think it was important we have someone to come on to talk about it. Thank you for coming on. Hang on. I'm going to end the show, and I'll talk to you off the air, all right?
I bet.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.